Welcome everybody. Good morning. And we always like to start with a little background information about who we are as CRP and Legal Service Corporation. Legal Service Corporation is an independent nonprofit established by Congress in 1974 to provide financial support for civil legal aid to low-income Americans. The corporation currently provides funding to 134 independent nonprofit legal aid organizations in every state, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories. It is the mission of Legal Aid of Northwest Texas to ensure equal justice for low-income people through the provision of high-quality legal representation and to improve the lives of low-income Texans through the rule of law. So legal aid focuses its practice in the areas of support for families, preserving the home, maintaining economic stability, safety, stability and health, individuals with special needs, and problems affecting groups of individuals. So back in 2008, when the bank's subprime mortgage lending practices caused the market to crash, and the government to have to bail out the financial industry responsible for the problem. In the aftermath, those banks were required to pay fines. So those fines resulted in funding that was allocated to help communities affected by their financial misappropriation through legal aid. So Legal Aid of Northwest Texas runs the Community Revitalization Project, which provides free legal services to underserved communities through support with fair and affordable housing, environmental justice, and community education. So what we're doing today is part of our work by developing nonprofit capacity in each of the groups that are represented here today. So just for an overview, we're going to overview the online CDBG federal funding grant application for COVID relief. Secondly, we'll review the application eligibility and requirements. We'll review the CDBG COVID-19 application and application process, and present the grant narrative writing tool prepared by CRP, and lastly, present the budget development tool prepared by CRP. So we'll take it, send it back over to you, Eleazar, and you'll take it from here.
Yes, thank you, Rosetta. I want to thank everybody for being here. We are on the second part of a two-part workshop in which we started to show groups how CDBG grants differ from a regular foundation grant. Last week, we submitted information to our contacts indicating in order to join this grant, and this is where we're going to take it from to go forward. In order to apply for this grant, you need to go to this place. And I already created a logon, so I am able to just come back in here, and it's very simple setup. You log in. And then it brings you, and today's workshop is going to be the overview of this application, and which was exactly the same process that we went through last week, but you're going to be able to see it explained from the actual online platform. So when I created this, I told the system, who the organization was, and it gave me this information. So I started an application, which I didn't fill out because it allowed me to move through it relatively quickly. It's all down here. This is the application, the complete application. So the first part, let me just explain this real quick. This is the resource library that they already provided us with. This is the information that everything was based on up until this point. So at this point, you can hide this because it's not relevant. We already know if we're going to be applying for this grant. There are specific areas, and we're going to just start with the summary. I'll take care of the summary. I'm going to ask Nancy Jakowicz, one of our staff attorneys, to help me with the CDBG CV3 application questions. CV stands for coronavirus, and third means that this is their third disbursement. We're going to have Sam Prince to help us with the budget parts. I will work with the required worksheets and attachments. So I'll start with the RFP summary, request for proposal, which we initially informed you. You need to tell them who you are, how much money you want. Don't be shy. We recommended about 20% of the gross revenue that you're reporting. Information on the grant application involves the person contact and the organization's information, as well as a DUNS number. We do have all of this information. You will recognize this as the OneNote, where all of the information we are giving you is here. So in here we put in DUNS. And so DUNS number, I'm going to ask Sam to tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, that's me.
Yes, sir.
A DUNS number is a number that the federal government uses to identify your organization when you're applying for a grant or when you're contracting with the federal government. Now, at some point, once you apply for a DUNS number, you're going to get all kinds of junk email from people offering to help you. And they won't tell you, but they're offering to help you apply for a fee. That isn't necessary. You can apply directly for a DUNS number, and when it expires or when it's about to expire, you can apply for a renewal all on your own. You don't need anyone's help. But you need this number in order to put it on your application so that when they process your application, they can identify you as the organization that you are.
Very well. DUNS number is something that you need to apply for, and this is an online free government site. It looks like this for you to apply, and it gives you some information about it. Again, you know that everything that we have provided you with as far as any type of workshop materials are found in this. It's a OneNote document. We will update it. Actually, if you have it from before, every time that we update something, it'll update on your end. So if you're new to us, I'm just going to cover this tab. We are providing you with all of the information that you need, all of the previous materials that we've gone through, narrative writing template to help you process your own narratives, and a budget template. If you don't have one, it's a good tool to have to begin. Okay, having said that, we're going back to the application, which is here. So we went through the DUNS number. Otherwise, moving on, CEO, Executive Director, who's like the top person there, their email address, the email address for anybody that you want to invite to write. You write their email address, first name, last name, their title, and you can click here, and then they will be able to come in and help you write the application in. So once you click next, you go to the next tab, and this next tab involves the actual application. We went over these last week, so I would like for Nancy to just speak on this, and I'll just show what the application looks like as she speaks. Nancy?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to just walk through this this application, and just for background purposes, as Eleazar was saying, this is a grant application that's due coming up November 16th. So we're just going through it more for orientation purposes. So you can see kind of the standard questions that you might come across in any type of federal grant application. So just walking through the questions, you're giving background information. And this is a grant that is kind of in response to COVID-19, and specifically it's a HUD Community Development Block Grant that the city is going to allocate towards 4 main categories. emergency housing assistance, also childcare related to employment. A third category is employment, so job search, resume, job training, kind of mix of employment resources. And then the fourth category is youth education, youth training. So childcare specifically here is for programs that help children under age 13 when parents or caregivers are seeking employment. And then the fourth category, youth training, is up to age 18 to help prepare young people for employment opportunities, as well as just skill development. So the city of Fort Worth is going to allocate, I think we saw something like $1 million in resources to this. And what they're really looking for is nonprofit organizations that already provide services, programs, activities in these 4 areas, right? So the questions that we're going to look at are really about explain what your nonprofit organization currently provides, and show us with detail and examples and description about what you do in these program areas. That way we, the city of Fort Worth, can award you a grant to continue to leverage what you're doing, right, to serve more people. So just going through this area, question 4 here looks to have the nonprofit identify which of these or all of these, which of these activities do you currently provide services in? Housing, childcare, employment, youth education, and tutoring. And then what dollar amount are you seeking? We had talked last week, Eleazar, about sort of if you're a new organization, a good kind of amount to strive for is maybe 20% of your annual budget. If you're a seasoned organization that's been providing these types of services, you may feel comfortable asking for more, right? So proposed request amount, an actual dollar amount. Question 6, when was the agency, when was the nonprofit corporation incorporated in the state of Texas? Has the agency previously received grant funding from the city of Fort Worth? If so, when? So these are just to kind of familiarize the city with who you are, right? Second round of questions, financial capacity. Is the agency currently providing the program service for which it is applying, right? To be competitive in this grant application, you really need to be in a position to say yes, right? You are currently providing activities. Describe the program or services to be delivered and how the program will be delivered. Describe all the steps a typical client will experience from the time of initial referral intake to the completion of delivery of the service. Here, they're looking for as detailed of a description as you can provide about how you determine income eligibility, right? Because this type of grant program, community development block grant, is really intended to serve people who are low or moderate income individuals or families, right? So they're looking to see that you have a screening process to determine eligibility, as well as how you actually provide the services and how you do accounting, right? Question 10, describe the agency's history of providing the type of services, income eligibility, screening and documentation, case management. So with this grant application, not only do you need to determine kind of threshold eligibility for the beneficiaries, right, the individuals who receive services, but they also want to have documentation that the person has been for employment, for example, or for housing, for example, some type of proof that the individuals you're serving have had experienced some type of loss of income, something that shows the intended beneficiary really is to, that you have the documents in place showing that the individuals that you're serving are eligible for these services. Experience with housing programs or with landlords. So here you're describing who you work with, what kinds of housing assistance you currently provide, if you work with intermediary groups like social service agencies or so on, to explain kind of who you work with, how you deliver these services to the individuals and families who need them. Question 10, what target population does the applicant agency generally work with in its current programs in terms of demographics. Here they're looking for demographic data around race, ethnicity, income, household makeup, housing tenure, geographic location or neighborhood, disability or employment status. So these kinds of demographic data kind of, again, describe that you're serving the intended beneficiary, low and moderate income individuals and households in neighborhoods with either individuals or as well kind of neighborhood areas where there's a higher concentrated poverty, or the neighborhood itself has characteristics of income eligibility. And there are some really, if you have this information, or if you're looking for this information, a really good data source to look to is one called Opportunity 360. It's a kind of a neighborhood level data, census tract level data that uses census data that the enterprise community partners has on their website. And it's a pretty easy process to kind of request a data report. And I'll just put the name of that data source in the chat box, but the types of data that are that you can easily pull are kind of race demographic data, as well as median household income in a census tract, as well as comparing it to in the larger county. You can also pull data on percentage of households living at or below poverty. So these are kind of good data, good examples of the kind of data you would want to include in section 11 to describe that you are serving the intended beneficiary. Again, low and moderate income households and individuals. Where and when will the proposed program be provided? Address, day, time. Will the proposed program have a virtual service delivery component? So for this question, in looking at sort of the background materials for this particular grant, the City of Fort Worth is looking for applications from groups that are able to begin January 1st to begin providing these services for this grant. And specifically, the two kind of tracks that they're looking to award funds are either on a 12-month basis or an 18-month basis. So you would want to have your answer conform with the kind of time constraints they're looking for. And in terms of virtual service delivery component, the background materials, the request for proposal guide that's available to you in their resource library on the Zoom grants page describes, in particular around youth training, having a virtual component to this. So I think there's room for that. If you're concerned about COVID and exposure and so on, but still want to provide programming, that's one area where there's an emphasis on virtual programming. And I would say that what's innovative about this type of grant is that there's eligible use of funds can be for the direct service, employment, for example, for job training, as well as sort of job supports like transportation. They describe bus passes, but potentially also van pools, right? The goal is to provide, to kind of fill the gap between, to address the barriers, right? Barriers to employment. And that's why childcare related to employment is one of the eligible uses of these CDBG COVID $3. Looking to question 13, how many unduplicated client households are estimated to be served by this program during the 6 months of contract? How many can be served in 12 months? What is the basis for the estimate? So here, question 13 is really, the city is not looking to replace funds that you might use for a program. They're looking to leverage funds, right? So they're looking to see that you'll be able to help more people rather than just kind of help the same group of people. Question 4, and they want to see that you have an accounting system in place to track how many people or families are being helped with your programs currently. Question 14, describe the organization's capacity to provide the proposed services. How large is the agency? How many staff will be involved in delivering this program? Does the agency provide other programming that will support or be directly related to the proposed program? Provide a list of the programs currently provided by the agency with a one-sentence description of each program. So here the city is looking again for kind of your history. You know, they want to award funds to groups that have shown through past performance that they're able to deliver the programs that they say they seek funding to through this program, right? And while their emphasis here is on housing assistance, childcare related to employment, and youth training, because they're just asking for what other programs do you do? I think they're really here looking to see what type of a group are you? How can you maybe leverage these resources, right? Perhaps you already have a focus on a specific client demographic or client group that has issues related to barriers to employment. So if that's a focus area that you have, they may be seeking groups, nonprofit organizations that are specifically targeting these kinds of households. So that's a way to just describe what your organization does. Question 15, what ongoing partnerships does the agency have with other service providers in the community, and what is the nature of those partnerships? So here they're kind of looking at what's your broader network, what kinds of social service agencies, social service providers do you work with? Larger nonprofit organizations potentially, or other types of city and county programs that have a focus also on housing, employment, childcare, youth training. The examples they describe: referral of clients, joint delivery of services, coordination of services. What coordination steps and partnerships does the agency plan to develop or continue in order to ensure the effectiveness of the program? So here the questions they're looking for is really to gauge what type of a nonprofit organization are you, how developed are your relationships with larger nonprofit, kind of a larger referral network, right, of nonprofit groups as well as public agencies, and how can you demonstrate, because of this network, that you're able to effectively distribute this type of assistance within 12 months, within 18 months, right, for a very high need population. Question 16, does the applicant have any sources of leveraged or required matching funds? If so, provide the source, types, amount, and documentation verifying these funds. So here, the question really is asking about what kinds of resources do you currently have, both in terms of staff capacity, as well as existing dollars for program dollars for these types of areas. You know, the city is looking for getting more lift or more utility out of kind of the existing network of nonprofit social service providers, and we would hope also grassroots groups, right, that are working at a community level with kind of low and moderate income neighborhoods and so on. We talked about this one a little bit last time, and I think this, hopefully we can come back to this question in our discussion period, because I think it would be useful for folks to think about this question kind of with a real big picture. How do you document in-kind resources? How do you document the resources that you have to show that, you know, even if you're a small nonprofit group, 25, you know, an additional grant award can help you leverage the programs that you currently provide. Question 17, does the applicant use any sources of funds other than those provided by the City of Fort Worth to deliver the program? What are the sources of leveraged funds? Please provide the source type, amount. So here the city is looking for what other types of grant programs, grant awards have you received? And what's the source? Is it local banks, local foundations, other types of city or county grant programs, other types of federal agency programs. They're kind of wanting to see a record of your resources. And again, the source, the type, the amount, maybe the purpose of those program dollars. During the past, question 18, during the past 3 years, January 2017 to present, has the applicant received any federal or state grant funds? Please list all such grants received by source and amount. So again, looking for specifically federal, state, public dollars for program services. During the past 3 years, has the agency been monitored or audited by any of the awarding agencies or federal or state grant funds of the awarding agencies for the grant funds it administers? If so, were there any findings or concerns? Please describe the monitoring or review letters and any responses from the agency. So again, here the city is looking for what's your track record for the last 3 years of providing programs, and have there been any audits or reason that should the city be informed about anything based on previous audits or reviews of your programs? Question 20, during the past 3 years, has the agency had an external audit? If so, were there any findings or concerns? Please provide the most recently conducted audit review or financial statement review. So again, they're looking for your financial records. Do you have these kinds of records in place, which demonstrate you have more organizational capacity, and they can review that as part of your grant application submission. So I think those are the top 20 questions. The materials in the resource library, you'll see that there's also a description of the scoring criteria, the types of things that the city is looking especially for, how they weigh that criteria. And that can just give you a sense of what the city looks for what it looks for importance. I would say, you know, whether or not any of the groups are on the call are looking to apply for this grant, this is a good kind of overview of the kinds of questions a typical grant application for a local government grant or for other sources are going to look for. What's your history of providing programs? How do you account for them? And what do you propose to do? And is what you're proposing what we say we're looking to fund? And groups, and looking to fund groups that have a history of providing programs in the areas they're looking to fund.
Thank you, Nancy. So I click next in the online application, and the next tab that we fill out is budget. And just to piggyback on or dovetail on what Nancy was just speaking about, they're requiring a lot of information. And I'm going to have Sam explain this portion. The important thing is that if you keep track of the documentation that they're asking as you go along, and you maintain your accounting and your bookkeeping in order, then you're able to do this. You may not be there now, but when we started these grant writing classes a year ago, there are organizations today that wouldn't have started doing the process because they didn't know what to do. So we're showing you the level to which you need to provide when you're looking for CDBG or federal grants monies, the level to which you would need to provide detail of your financial capacity. So without further ado, let's do the budget tab, and I asked Sam to take this one.
Thank you, Eliezer. Here we have categories for the budget for your program. It is important to know two things. One, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, otherwise known as HUD, has specific categories that they want you, into which they want you to put your various expenses. Secondly, when you produce a program like this, if there are matching fund requirements, in other words, you have to put up money from another source in addition to whatever you're asking HUD to give you through the CDBG grant, or in this case, Tarrant County to approve HUD's allocation of funds to you. They have 3 columns on the form where they ask you to list funding for your program coming from another funding source. So if, for instance, you have general contributions, that would be one source. If you have a grant from a particular local foundation, that would be a second source. And if you have funding from United Way or some other organization like that, that would be a third source. The most important thing is to show Tarrant County and HUD that you have the capability of providing the matching funds and that you know how to list the expenses and then manage the expenses. So we have personnel and salaries and benefits rather. That would be salaries, health insurance, unemployment insurance, pension, 401k, everything on that order. Supplies and services would be office supplies or program supplies, and cleaning services, catering services, everything like that. Facility operations and utilities, that would be basically owning or renting and providing your physical facility, which would include utilities. Legal, financial, and insurance, if you pay any lawyers, if you pay any accountants, insurance that you have, all of that would go in that. Direct assistance would be services that you provide to clients that would not include the salaries and benefits of your personnel. Short-term emergency rental assistance, if you pay the rent for people, for instance, in a homelessness prevention program, that's where those funds would go. If you have any other expenses that don't fit into those categories, then you would create a category below and explain what it is. The budget narrative explains what you're going to do with the money. It's not sufficient to simply list the expenses. You have to explain to them what you're going to do with it.
And I'm not going to type anything this time. So after that, then we go into the required, financial capacity. Okay, this is a document that they need you. Go ahead, Sam. This is part of the financial.
In recent years, HUD has become a lot more curious about the specific details of how you manage your finances. Mm-hmm. So they have created this particular worksheet where they want to see how basically the cash flow of your organization on the beginning and the end of each month for the last 12 months. So you would begin your balance, you would show them the beginning balance on the first day of the month, you would show the ending balance on the last day of the month, and then you would list total expenses. That's for each month for the previous 12 months. On the salary budget worksheet, they want to know who is full-time What is their annual full-time salary rate? And the estimated percentage of their time that is charged to the grant. So if you have 10 people and each of them have allocated 20% of their time or 1 day a week to the grant, then you would list them as full or part-time in the first column, have the total amount you're paying them in the second column, and then the percentage of their time that's charged to the particular program that you're applying for in the third column.
All right, thank you, Sam. I'm just going to relatively quickly go over this, and I'm gonna interject or ask for somebody else to interject as I go through. Everything that is required here obviously needs to be uploaded. So the first grant-specific questionnaire, and this information we have, this is what they're referring to. I'm sorry, I thought I had the document open. The first item is asking, are you serving the population in either of these three categories? And you need to, I'll go back to that, but you need to tell them, this is the category from above that we fit into. The first category is, do you serve 51% at least of low, moderate income persons? So the client population that you're serving is at least that. So you would check that box on the bottom. Presumed benefit clientele means that you're assuming that 100% of the clients that you are serving are in one of these categories. Abused children, homeless persons, elderly persons, victims of domestic violence, persons with severe disabilities, illiterate adults, persons living with AIDS, or migrant farm workers. So any on one or more of these is your presumed benefit clientele. So you're telling them 100% of the people are in this area. And so it could be perhaps that all of the service that you provide is not found here. So then you would probably check the 51 to low to moderate if you're not in this presumed benefit clientele. 100% low moderate income persons. This is when you are stating that you are providing a financial benefit that is direct. Means that all clients served by the proposed program are documented as meeting HUD's definition of low to moderate income. This applies where agencies request to be reimbursed on a per client per service basis. So they have this thing where if you have a scholarship, reimbursement of transportation costs, or payment of construction costs for architectural barrier removal in a client's home. So it's very, very specific for the 100% low to moderate under this category. There may be other things that fit in here, but I would say generally unless you fit in category 2, you would probably all be 51% low to moderate. And that just covers a wide swath of the population that we're serving. So once you figure out which one you belong to, you check one here. So I'm just gonna do that for now. And then they want your program information. How will the proposed program serve the clientele indicated above? Now remember, you answered this question previously. So you don't want to copy and paste. You want to maybe restate it a little, just because it's in a different form and you have an opportunity. It's not a chore. It shouldn't feel like a chore. It should be like an opportunity to tell them something that you didn't add before. Because some of the other slots where you need to put information have a character limit. So here's your chance to provide additional information. Organizational chart. I'm going to ask Sam to speak about an organizational chart.
An organizational chart lists every staff position in your organization and shows how they interact with each other. It's generally in the rough shape of a pyramid. when you see it graphically. So the little box at the top says executive director or CEO. Underneath that are the people that report directly to the CEO. And if there is a secretary or an assistant, that would go in a separate line that would show assistant. Then below that, people that report to the people that report to the CEO or executive director are listed underneath. That is generally how an organizational chart works. Most important thing here is the people who are approving your program or your project, they want to see how your organization functions. And then they want to make sure that you have the staff in place to be able to properly manage the program that you're asking them to fund.
Thank you, Sam. Can you take also resumes and job descriptions and licenses and certifications?
They ask for resumes of everyone that is working on the program, everyone that is somewhat affiliated with the program. So your executive director, although your executive director is not directly working on the program, there's a separate program that reports to the executive director. Nonetheless, the executive director's resume is required. And then everyone who's involved in the program, their resumes are also required. Again, HUD is looking to make sure that you have people that have experience necessary to be able to manage the program that you're asking them to fund. Job descriptions, it's another written document where you briefly explain what each person does. Now, there are several standard components of a job description, and the easiest way to find out what that is, if you don't already know, is to simply go to Google and Google job description, and a number of templates will pop up, and then you can take a look and pick the one that you like. But the most important thing there is you need to explain to them specifically what staff people are doing, and although not indicate directly, show that what they're doing is somehow related to what your program is. Licenses and certifications. In our case, Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, every attorney has to be licensed by the State Bar of Texas. So we say that in our grant applications, and we list and we tell them that every attorney that is associated with the organization is licensed in the state of Texas. And for us, that is sufficient, generally. Your annual organization budget, that's the overall organization, not just this one program. So you show them where your revenue comes from, where your expenses come from, and then how you project, what you project your financial situation will be at the end of the year. Again, this shows the people that are reviewing your grant application that you know what you're doing when it comes to managing your organization. Managing finances are a very important part of managing your organization. Audit review or financial statement review. If you are an organization that receives more than a certain sum of money from the federal government, you are required to have an independent audit. So annually, Legal Aid of Northwest Texas gets an independent audit. We simply attach a copy of our audit to our grant application. If you are smaller than that and you're not required to have an independent audit, nonetheless, it is advisable to have some independent financial person, an accountant, for instance, review your records just to make sure that everything that you're doing is in compliance with generally accepted accounting procedures. The next item on the list is Form 990. That's the IRS tax return that every nonprofit organization has to file. And you would simply attach a copy of your most recent Form 990, which would be for the last tax year that you filed. If you're in the process of producing your 990 for the previous tax year, then the grant application is in the spring. Then you would attach the previous year's 990.
All right, I'll go with this one. Thank you, Sam. Basically, Form 1295 is a form that is required, and we were looking into it, and it appears that if you have any contract that is active with a government entity, then you're required to submit a disclosure as an interested party, and that's the form here. That's Sam and I were discussing, and we figured that although it says it's required, if it's a does not apply kind of thing, I don't think that you need to worry about it. That's why it's important to do this before the deadline, because you would have had this question answered already. Section 504 questionnaire, let me get that and show that. It's a questionnaire that basically refers to organizations that have 15 or more employees. So if it does not apply, this is what I did, I checked that. Generally, the groups that we're working with, this information is so that you can understand the level up until which, if you're looking for large sums of money, access to large pools of money from the federal government, this is how detailed you need to be. So the information might seem like, well, that does not apply, but the fact that you are understanding that there's levels up there that you can aspire to bring your nonprofit to. And I would say as Sam mentioned, United Way as a funding source. United Way has one of the strictest evaluation protocols for allowing for grants disbursement, and also for the reporting of that. For something very minor, you can lose the ability to work with the United Way, and it's all because of reporting. So I digress. This particular form does not apply, so you keep going down, and it asks for employment requirement. Well, if it didn't apply up here, it doesn't. But what we found, and Sam and I were discussing this form, that if you have a site, and if this doesn't apply to you because you don't have more than 15 employees, which most who are here don't, but you need to consider that if you have a physical site, there are questions that you need to be up on, that the answers should all be yes. See, I put down, and this doesn't apply, but for the purposes of instruction, if you have a physical site, you should be aware that you need to have accessible parking spaces available for individuals who cannot walk. So wheelchair accessibility. If there's, is there an accessible ramp? Common use entrances accessible to persons with mobility impairment. This is all the same question. Is an elevator available when needed for a client or employee? So if you're on the second floor, how can somebody with a wheelchair get to you? Is an accessible restroom available at the facility? If you are having a physical facility, you need to think of these things, which most people who are getting the facility will realize is from the Americans with Disabilities Act that always needs to be kept up to date. So again, this doesn't apply. So I would just click NA, and then at the bottom, put my information, and then upload this as a questionnaire 504. And then any other documents that you want to include. They provide several of these, additional document, and you upload everything. Once you're done with that, it says previous. So here you can we went through the whole application, as you may have noticed. Then you submit it or print preview. I would always print preview, and then deal with submitting once I've had everybody check that everything looks good. And you can print the whole application, and then submit it. Again, I want to make sure that everybody knows that the main purpose of this is we understand that most people who are here are not ready to do this kind of work, but we are projecting a year from now, if you are at least aware of these items, you can begin to collect and to set your organization to be successful at getting federal grants, United Way grants, and just scoop just about any other grant that's sitting around, because once you're up there in that level that you are able to tell your good story, you can pinpoint who gets benefited, how they get benefited, where they get benefited, and what you're doing with your money and how it's being expended. That is where you need to be, in my eyes, grants worthy. We're just about done. I want to ask Sam to review again the grant writing process summary.
First, you read the grant instructions. This is not like putting together a piece of IKEA furniture where you start putting it together and suddenly in the middle some piece doesn't work right and then you look at the instructions.
That's great.
You have to start by reading the instructions, because there's always something buried in there somewhere that's going to tell you specifically something that you should do that you thought that you wouldn't have thought otherwise that you needed to do. Then you collect all of the documents that they're asking you to submit along with the application, and also the documents that you will need in order to write your application. Then you take a look through the questions on the application. As you look through the questions, make sure you understand what each question is and what it's asking for. Then you proceed to prepare a convincing program and financial narrative in response to the various questions, so that at the end of it, you convinced yourself that you would fund this program. I'm not necessarily saying you should be your harshest critic, but you should take a disinterested third-person look at what you've written to make sure that you're convinced that it's acceptable to submit. Then you review everything you've written and review it again and review it again. You never know what you're going to find on the third or fourth review that you wouldn't have seen on the first or second review. Finally, when you're convinced that you've done the best job that you can do, you hit submit. Just make sure you hit submit before it's due. And make sure that the time that you're hitting submit is the time that they mention in the application. If you're applying for a federal grant, for instance, and it's being submitted electronically to Washington, and it's due at 11:59 p.m., make sure it's 11:59 p.m. in the correct time zone. And that's essentially the grant writing process.
Thank you, Sam. We mentioned before that we are going to go over some templates. This narrative, and everybody has access to, actually everybody that was here last week that received the documents that we submitted on the workshop has this template. It's here in Word form, and it's here just as a picture. This is how CDBG grants were previously set up, where you put in all of your information about the percentages of people that you're serving, where you're doing it, what city, what zip codes, all of that used to be done sort of like in a narrative. But the way that they're asking the questions now, as you heard with Nancy, they are asking, in this particular case, 20 specific questions. Well, if you take those 20 specific questions and you put them in here, then you have a narrative that you could used for other grants that you might want to use because you're answering questions that are relevant. So anyway, this is a template that if you don't have it, I'm going to ask you to send us some information. We'll give you the information later so that, and request it, and request the narrative template, or actually the OneNote. You're going to get basically this tab with all of the grant information that we have discussed before, and then the writing template, which is here. And Sam was speaking, Sam or Nancy, I don't recall who, I think it was Nancy, was speaking about the deliverables. Who's going to be doing what? They're going to be asking what you're going to be producing on, and have a timeline. So in your explanation, you can actually have an objective and have the responsible person, the timeline that things should be done by, and what's going to be the deliverable or the output. So this is a template for you. Again, it's in Word, so you can play with it and have it in all one document. Environmental project results, past performance, and programmatic capacity information. So again, Nancy was speaking about, if you have a history, if you don't start writing your history, it'll never exist. So this pretty much will help you when you look at the questions in the actual grant. Come in here and just set them in here in a nice order so that you can have a narrative that explains your past performance. And so if you don't have agreements right now that are, agreements that you signed, you can indicate verbal agreements or collaborating with, and then, list the people or the entities that you're collaborating with, and then update it as you go. Personnel, again, who's doing what, speak nicely about them, everything that they've done with the community, with the type of funding that you are presenting. So this, again, is a template where you can actually put all of the responses from the previous questions for the COVID-19 grant that we're studying, and you can, once you answer the questions, just assemble them here by category. Again, we also provided everyone with, and this is the Excel spreadsheet, actual spreadsheet. This down here is a picture of the spreadsheet. So I'll review it very briefly. This basically lets the organization know that this is what your operating budget is for everything that you're doing. So down here, this template is for $225,000 operating budget. And so donations and all other things are going in here. But if you want to let the people that for the grant know where it is that you're spending your money, you can also have something like this, where you tell them $8,000 is going to be for admin support and volunteer stipends and laptops, emergency hotspots, things that relate to COVID. Now, again, this is a template, so your budget needs to reflect what they're giving money for. So you would put in personnel money is going to be this, and operations in COVID-related items will be here, so you'll update this. Let me see. Okay, so this template actually is in Excel, and it allows you to input your revenue in a tab behind the main one, and it allows you to put in your in-kind and professional time donations. And so you end up with operating income. I'm not gonna get into that because we did this the last time, with a total operating income that's coming from the worksheet that's behind this front template. So again, this is a template for the budget if you want to present it in some fashion and you don't have that information or that set up right now. This is something nice you can use. That's the end of that. Let's go to this. Rosetta?
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Have you seen if there's any questions? I haven't spotted any.
No, I haven't spotted any questions for Q&A.
Okay, very good. I want to thank this group of talented people. I'm a legal secretary at CRP. Sam Prince, the director of development. Sam works directly with legal aid, and he is the person that makes all the funding flow. So anytime that he speaks, you can tell that he has weight in his words because he knows what he's talking about, and we thank him for being here. Nancy, she's a scholar to me and an amazing presenter, very involved with community work. Raish as well. Raish Tumnanovic, a paralegal with CRP. He's going on 1 year and he's been very useful and has a heart for the community. So I value that. And of course, Rosetta Howard-Jackson. She is a very supportive paralegal who is out there helping me to think through certain things that are coming out better because she has a good mind on her shoulders. And if nobody has any questions, I just want to thank everybody for coming and wish you all a great rest of the weekend, and I'll see you next week.